Hello, RoahmMythril here once again, getting back to RoahmMythril 3, and it's time for the judge commentary on the last two stages we just played. Starting with 115th place, Skull Secret Zone by Takama Tier. This stage got a 46.4, with a 13.4 in design, 9.8 in fun, 5.8 in creativity, 8 in aesthetics, and 9.4 in functionality. Mick. You know, I wouldn't have known it was unfinished if that sign wasn't there. That being said, while I certainly hope you feel better, I must say I'm not sure if the finished plan would have been an improvement. Level length is a tricky beast. It's up to interpretation for many people, which means it's very easy to end up too short or too long. Skull Secret Zone is slightly too brief for my liking, but it's still long enough that I don't feel like I'm missing something afterwards. Given that, doubling the number of mini-stages would be too long, which is always worse than being too short, especially with over 150 entries. I played Chemical Skull first, which was pretty okay. The Met encounters tended to be a bit samey, but I found myself appreciating Skull Met and Skeleton Joe. I can't say they're scenarios or anything I haven't seen, but that's because those scenarios work. Firing at you from above is a good use of those enemy types. The underwater section is in a similar boat. It doesn't feel novel, but the design is serviceable, save for the spike drop being before the checkpoint as opposed to after. I wish sea mines were used a little more, though. They had a good intro despite barely appearing. There was also at least one motobug that just teleported, no idea why. Ice Hill was considerably more interesting. Besides the unique grass-ice aesthetic, I found the water spouts and melting ice were pretty spiffy, especially when they were combined. Beyond that, the icicle intro was really clever, using a cloud of pangs to slow us down, thus forcing us to see the icicles forming. That was really cool, and I wish more was done with them afterwards. But if Chemical Skull felt short, Ice Hill felt really short. I wanted so much more, and was hoping for more from that drop, but instead, it was just an abrupt Sonic Man. A crying shame, as this had a good start going. Instead of adding 2 more zones, I'd advise expanding these 2 to get more level from them. That might be easier for players to stomach, on top of making a better level. Shinryu. First and foremost, I'm sorry to hear that you weren't able to make your level into what you originally envisioned due to health issues. Those kinds of situations are always rough, but in the end, your health is way more important when compared to finishing a stage for a fan game. On that note, I'll be judging this level based on its current state and its own merits. While it's certainly nice to have context for what it could have been, I don't think 2 more mini-stages would have helped it. The length of the stage, with the 2 sections combined, seems fine as is. As for the actual level design, a lot of it unfortunately feels rather non-distinct. Some of the segments in the Ice Hill Zone path do manage to stick out a bit, if only due to a few tricky jumps here and there across ice blocks. That aside, I didn't really find much else that was noteworthy with this level. Besides maybe some moments with those fish that might as well be up and downs, as some of them can easily blindside you and cause a cheap death. Having said that, however, I can still tell there was at least some thought put into this stage. It's just not fully realized as per the explanation at the beginning. I'd definitely be interested in seeing a more refined version of this level that does the original concept justice. Just to give a suggestion, having gimmicks from the respective Sonic levels and mixing them with the ones from Mega Man would really help make things more interesting. While this version of the level might not be all that great, there's still a lot of potential with the concept itself. Patchy, Red Mountain Zone Act 2. It is pretty obviously a Sonic crossover stage if the name didn't already give it away. There is just a flat-out Eggman statue. The stage aesthetics are pretty alright, the Skullman and Chemical Plant tile sets mixed together surprisingly well. Not so much with Iceman and Green Hills though, unfortunately. The reskins of the Mega Man enemies and Tabadniks are also neat. Other than the graphical side of things though, there isn't a whole lot going on with its gimmick of mashing Sonic and Mega Man elements together. Tile sets are just tile sets, no new platforming gimmicks, and the choice of Badnik enemies is very basic. Random spikefall section in the very first screen with no indication that it'd be one, rude. And the checkpoint is placed right after that section, kind of a mean trap there. Also, up and down fish enemies with 0 indications that they are there, which is never fair regardless of source accuracy. There's just one too many cheap tricks in this short entry that I can't really give a very high score for design. Just to drive the point that this is a Sonic crossover stage further, probably both paths have Sonic Man as the end boss. A little bit disappointing that both paths end up leading to the same boss, despite the radically different theming. Flashman 85. Here's what I wanted from this level. one half that's a Sonic level with Mega Man enemies, one half that's a Mega Man level with Sonic enemies. Instead, this is two separate Mega Man levels with no Sonic music, three nice-looking Sonic enemy sprites, and a chaotic collision of tiles. The dev kit was full of Sonic staples. Where the slopes, springs, moving, swinging, falling platforms, and pipes that suck you in and whisk you elsewhere. Things like penguins and pink water are a good start, but the overall enemy gimmick selection doesn't work the crossover angle nearly hard enough. More inherent overlap in the source levels might have helped the theming. Iceman Cap Zone and Chemical Plant Man, perhaps? Anything that avoids two unpleasant dryland confrontations with a boss whose only relevance is his name. I think the core issue is too little planning and attention to detail, as evidenced by the challenge design. Players must instantly adapt to new concepts, e.g. water plus building platform plus buzzsaw plus worm plus fish introduced simultaneously on one screen, and deadly surprises, e.g. blindly falling onto spikes right before a checkpoint. A few spikes are missing collision. Unnecessary two-way transitions abound. Checkpoints and health refills feel like afterthoughts. What ruins the level for me is the text box at the beginning. Starting with a lengthy apology sets the level up for failure, breaks the immersion, and forces me, as a blind judge, to digest bias-inducing information that I now need to filter out. Some positives. I like the bolt and token placement, the interior Green Hill graphics, the vertical Skeleton Joe section, the boss chamber skull decoration, one or two water spout challenges, and the intro area with its statues and stage select music. Ace Spark. I think you got the wrong idea when making a level for this contest. Splitting your limited time between multiple small stages results in two lackluster stages rather than one good stage. I feel like the graphics weren't done particularly well and tile sets were mixed very haphazardly, especially in the Iceman stage. The fact that only some enemies were reskinned as Sonic ones, including some of the same type of enemy not being reskinned, gave the stage an incredibly unfinished feel. The fact the stage does not bother to use Sonic music and instead uses stock Mega Man tunes really robs the stage of some potential identity, and again, helps it feel very unfinished. The jumping fish, up and down reskins, are not fun enemies when placed over pits. Yes, these are also in the Sonic games, but those games always place these under bridges, where the player would not die instantly due to not having natural clairvoyance. There was one jump after the second Sniper Joe that was quite unfair when the enemies respawned behind you, making the jump between bullets and past a jumping fish unpleasant. Also, why is there only one boss? At least use an Icy Dev Kit boss for the ice-themed level. Yes, I know he is called Sonic Man, but come on. While most of the level is quite standard and dull, there is one section at the end of the ice stage that combines the ice blocks and geysers, which felt genuinely new and interesting. Expanding on this sort of idea would have been a much better direction for your level to go in. I can relate to not feeling very well and running out of time on something, but in these situations you need to focus on one main thing. Making one good stage, even if short, would have been a much better use of your time and energy. So, yeah, there is one part there that I do kind of have to agree with. Whether you got sick or not, I don't think making 4 mini stages would have been the right way to go. You have to remember this is the Make a Good Mega Man level contest, not Make a Good Mega Man game contest. And if you really think about it, 4 stages is like half of one of the Game Boy games. I mean, yeah, it's half of any of the games, since they're normally 8 stages, but you know what I mean. 4 stages and a stage select. The ideas here are interesting, and I think they do have merit. I just think they do need more polish than what was given here, which, obviously, it was an effect of you running out of time due to health issues, which, yeah, I totally get that. Like I've said, I have had so many delays, so many problems, so much of a backlog caused on this channel because of health things going wrong. Wisdom teeth, appendix, just general illness. Yeah, it's always a fun time. That being said, I think one of the biggest things that would have helped, honestly, would have been some work on the graphics, because, yeah, the tile sets, they are just kind of a bit of a mishmash. And it is by design, but I think a little work to have made them more cohesive, really represent the items from, like, for example, Iceman Stage and Green Hill Zone, but in a more cohesive way. Like, making Green Hill Zone look frozen over, and having some of, like, Iceman's frozen palm trees and everything to where it still at least looks like a cohesive stage and not like somebody just put stickers over something. The badniks you used, I honestly really liked those sprites. The Motobugs, those were really cute. It would have been nice to see some more badniks though. I'm not really sure which ones I would recommend, but it would have been cool to see more of those. And yeah, including a bit more Sonic in the mix, I think, would have been a good way to go about it. Like, split the difference between the music. Like, until you get to the first checkpoint, it's either Mega Man or Sonic, and then after the checkpoint, it switches to the other. Also, using some Sonic traps and mechanics, I think that would have worked really well, and I think it really would have sold the concept. But for the limited time, I think you did fairly nice with what you did. But yeah, as far as the ambition of having done 4 mini stages instead of just 2, or really even just focusing on 1, sometimes with a contest like this, you have to keep in mind sometimes less is more. You have limited time, you don't have to make this giant epic to make your mark. Sometimes something short but really well designed, really tightly focused, and just refined to a sharp edge will make more of a standout impression than something that's just big to be big. But honestly, overall solid, good concepts, just need some tightening up. And now, jump cut. And so our second stage today was 114th place, Mechanical Factory by Mega Banana. This stage got a 47 even, with a 16.8 in design, 10 in fun, 5 in creativity, 6.6 in aesthetics, and 8.6 in functionality. Mick. Gotta say, it's a bit of a treat to see someone making use of the expanded crash lifts. They make a solid core gimmick, with a number of scenarios built using their new drop mechanics alongside the ability to go in 4 directions. I found the snail mid-boss with the lifts to be particularly memorable, if only because the fight is either annoying or hilariously easy, depending on where you stand, and the final room before the boss proved an excellent culmination of everything that came before. The other gimmicks aren't as interesting, but their scenarios are still decently designed, for the most part. That said, the lack of proper indicators for the telespawns and junk blocks hurts the flow of the level, as you have to see and memorize where they'll appear instead of having a clear visual. Yeah, I do kind of agree with that. It is always weird to just see something spawn in from nowhere with no indicator. The junk also has a way of just piling up and short-circuiting the stage around it, necessitating some cleanup. Unfortunately, the level's true biggest issue is that it isn't terribly memorable. While it's nice to have crash lifts doing more things, this otherwise feels like a Metal Man remix with an improperly looped Fuse Man theme. Okay, I was right, it was Fuse Man. The amount of Mega Man 2 presence is a big part of that, and while it does step away from Mega Man 2 assets occasionally, it doesn't usually do so in any notable way. To make matters worse, the gimmick selection is overall generic. Blocks and conveyors are a pretty familiar combination, and the crash lifts are ultimately just platforms. That the enemies are all from Mega Man 2 except for the snail doesn't help, and it ends with an old-fashioned Metal Man. As a result, while the design is for the most part decent, the level fails to stand out, and you need both good and interesting design to truly succeed. Shinryu. I feel like this stage probably could have used a better name. Not that it's inaccurate, but it is a bit on the generic side. That also more or less sums up my feelings on the level itself. The ideas are certainly there, but most of the segments end up feeling pretty dull in the long run. I think the main reason for this is because moving platforms are inherently a very basic gimmick, one that needs a lot more than just gaps and floating enemies to be made interesting. Speaking of which, while I can understand the use of tellies for this sort of stage, I definitely advise giving their spawn points some sort of visual indicator. The same goes for the junk block spawners as well. Not that you'd be at much risk of accidentally bumping into one as it spawns here, but that sort of conveyance wouldn't hurt the level either. If anything, I think the biggest issue is that the stage can be rather tedious. Most of that comes from having to wait for some of the Crash Man platforms to loop back around. Specifically, the one in the second token room, and the final one leading up to Metal Man. Yeah, those ones take a while to move around. Both of them can take much longer to come back around than they really should, which becomes even more of an issue if you happen to die in either of those sections. All that being said, I did get a bit of enjoyment out of the conveyor and junk block based segments. They're not exactly what I'd call innovative or even difficult, but they're still structured well enough, and don't carry the same wait times that the Crashman platforms do. For what it's worth, I think you're at least on the right track here when it comes to level progression, how the tokens were regulated to easily identifiable side rooms and introductory segments. It just needs something more in order to properly stand out from the countless other moving platform levels. Patchy. Iron Assembly Line. Quite a decent little level. It stuck with the theme nicely throughout, and made some nifty use with the junk blocks. It also feels like the stage was very Mega Man 2 inspired with its selection of gimmicks and enemies. The snail mini-boss from Toadman is quite obnoxious as it is, so dealing with the crash lift timing just makes it a nightmare fight. Use Laser Trident to save yourself some trouble. Second token is a little problematic with its screen taking a bit of time to get back to, being a few screens away from the checkpoint, and the crash lift placed precisely at the worst spot so you're always forced to wait for it to finish one cycle before you can attempt the precise timing on the gaps. Just a general tip to everyone to refrain from putting Sniper Joes right after checkpoints, because that's where most of the player's time is going to be spent on for a stage after needing to retry a bunch. Could have maybe used a less obvious boss than Metal Man, but it's alright, he's still fitting to the theme of the level. Flashman 85. Oh, I see. Due to how the title is written, yes, everything is lowercase. A few important lessons can be learned from this level. First, there's a fine line between needing to react quickly and being unfairly blindsided. Junk blocks start falling from the sky without warning, Sniper Joes lie in ambush at screen entrances, tellies appear out of thin air. Surprises like these need to be telegraphed somehow, or else the player needs to be given more time to process what's happening when the unexpected occurs. Second, take special weapons into account when designing a level. Laser Trident, a weapon with a large ammo reserve that invalidates shields, is the weakness of nearly every enemy here. Anyone with a little magnet beam expertise can sneak into the token rooms through the exit shafts. Almost every platforming challenge can be bypassed effortlessly with Rush, and considering how repetitive and harrowing some of the platform tracks are, there's little reason not to. Yeah, I was just stubborn on this one. Third, sensible construction goes a long way in making a level feel professional. Why are the checkpoints hovering slightly above the ground? Yeah, I did notice that. Why is there a bottomless pit when the screen below contains a conveyor you should logically land on? Where are these junk blocks coming from if there's a solid wall on the screen above them? What's up with the awkward screen shifting when exiting the second token screen? So, there are some oversights and there's a lot to finesse, but let's not gloss over the merits. Clearly, some consideration went into the length, focus, learning curve, challenge progression, checkpoints, power-ups, and overall difficulty. Although I would have liked a mixing of tile sets, Metal Man's graphics are implemented competently, and the screen with Eddie looks particularly appealing. Despite an eventual fade-out, the music remix sounds great. Surprises aside, junk blocks are used creatively and effectively. Telly plus Sniper Joe is a genuinely good combination, thank you. I could stand to be wowed more, but there's a foundation for something good here. And A-Spark. This feels like a bad Mega Man Maker level. I have no real kind words for this. The camel's back was struggling, buckling. And then I think my goodwill toward this stage was ended by the time the fifth telly and third junk block spawned on my head without warning, thanks to a total lack of graphical indicators. I don't think any of the challenges presented are in a vacuum super difficult, but it's infuriating due to the lack of attention paid to very, very basic level design principles. Mega Man 2 Wily 4 is known for combining tellies and crash lifts in a manner that results in death if you get knocked off. You know what else Mega Man 2 Wily 4 gives the player? Graphical indication through holes in the terrain to where the tellies spawn from. Mega Man 3 Sparkman Revisited also has junk blocks combined with death pits. But that stage, for all its faults, also shows where they spawn. This is very basic stuff that can take a stage like this from being what might be a reasonable challenge to being plain unfair and unfun. Honestly, this stage lost the right for me to attempt to buster only its challenges rather quickly. Given just how out of nowhere death comes in this stage, one might have been reasonable checkpoints quickly draw out their welcome. By the end, I'd had enough of being knocked into pits and was rather heavily abusing Water Shield and Rush Jet. I don't even like using Rush Jet in the official games unless it's forced. I really don't. The Crashman lifts are also just an utter nuisance here. 2 tile-wide gaps turn the jumps into almost pixel-perfect affairs, and honestly, that second token that involves said 2 tile gaps and tellies is just way easier to suicide jump off Rush Jet to collect rather than bother with the long way round. Some of the crash lifts also desync pretty easily, and oftentimes you are left waiting around for an arbitrary amount of time if you miss. Since they are often so long, and so few rides are to be caught. Honestly, it's hard to tell how difficult this stage's challenges really are when I keep getting blindsided or forced to use weapons to prevent crap constantly sideswiping me into one of 1,000 death pits in this level. I got rather sick of Fuse Man's theme by the end of it too. Fuse Man's theme. I love that song, and I got sick of it. For what it's worth, I don't consider this a skip candidate. Weapon use is viable, and rooms are not so convoluted and cramped that a good old rush jet won't get you across them. Bring a W tank or two, and you cheese most rooms. But at that point, it kinda takes away the stage's design. And since the stage is basically just Metal Man's level, but worse and with less interesting gimmicks and more generic enemies... Okay, in a moment I'm gonna have something to say about part of that statement at least. Anyway, and since the stage is basically just Metal Man's level but worse and with less interesting gimmicks and more generic enemies, so can also expect some of the other scores to be hurting as well. So yeah, obviously, I am not a fan. Okay, normally I don't call out the judge comments, after all, everyone's entitled to their opinion. But there is one part there that just felt like throwing in an insult to throw in an insult, and that is the phrasing of Metal Man stage having more interesting gimmicks. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the only gimmick in the original Metal Man stage just the conveyor belts? Like, I will admit it has been a while since I've played through the classic games proper. However, I have recently been watching one of my friends, Logan, playing through them, and I'm pretty sure that's the only real gimmick in the stage, which, yeah, the conveyor belts are here in this stage, plus more. So, saying that this stage had less interesting gimmicks when it literally is the only gimmick that was actually in Metal Man stage plus more, that just feels like trying to take a cheap shot that doesn't actually land. Like, you can tell Ace was pretty mad during this comment. And so I think some things are definitely exaggerated there. I will freely admit that, yes, the two-tile gaps on the Crashman lifts, those were a bit of a thing. Those felt very exacting, and there were a lot of those jumps. Once you get the timing for them down, it's not too bad, but it still does feel pretty troublesome. My mind is still just stuck on the gimmicks of Metal Man thing. I guess if you really stretch it, you could count the falling press platforms, or the press traps, which they're just kind of glorified thwomps that hurt you from all angles, so you can't use them for platforming, and even the chain hurts you, so all they are is something to just get in the way and delay you moving forward. I guess if you really stretch the definition, you could also count the mole hallway, but that too is just tedium. Were there other gimmicks? Anyway, moving on. Overall, I think this stage was very competently designed. Honestly, I did really like the junk blocks. I think they added some interesting platforming gimmicks. I kind of like working with junk blocks. And the crash lifts, they are a bit chaotic when it comes to those exact jumps. Also that one where there's like two of them orbiting each other, that one confused me. I'm not really sure why it confused me, but it did. I do agree with the general consensus that yes, visual indicators for the telespawns and probably the junk blocks, that would have helped a lot. But other than that, I don't really have anything bad to say about this level. I liked it. It was fairly simple. It did pretty much solidly just use like Metal Man graphics and gimmicks and everything. But it added more to it, made it its own, so it does feel very much like a Metal Man remix. And I think that's perfectly fine. A perfectly fine, serviceable level. So yeah, with that, thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series so far, and I shall see you again next time. Until then, fare thee well. Spider tricks, spider tricks.